everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm LYNDALL STOUT. Management of summer crops is winding down. We'll have an update for you coming up. But first, we're getting ahead of weeds in winter crops. Here's our extension weed scientist, Dr. Misha Manuchehri.
I went out with a delayed pre-herbicide like Zidua or Anthem Flex, and I don't have a rain coming. What's going to happen to my ryegrass? Unfortunately, those herbicides, when we spray them on the soil surface, they do need to move into our profile. So rain is very much needed, and we're all hoping for some rains right now to get those products in the ground.
So if they've already applied, what's that window of opportunity where we need rain or that application starts to break down?
Yeah, so many of these products, they actually hang out in the soil for a pretty long time. So I'm less worried about them breaking down. I'm more worried about the weed emerging, because once the weed emerges, that product doesn't work on an emerged weed. So that's, if you plant it into very dry conditions and you kind of dust it in and you're waiting for a rain, you might be okay. But if you have moisture and your wheat and your weeds are coming up, but your herbicide didn't move, that could cause some concern. The positive is that with a plant like ryegrass, we usually get more than one flush. So there is a good chance you will control your later flush.
What else are you seeing and hearing about this fall?
Yeah, we're getting some pictures of bromes. We have 4 economically important brome species in the state of Oklahoma, and typically the very first one that emerges is called rescue grass. It's also, unfortunately, the most difficult to kill. So if you have a brome coming up, a hairy grass weed, kind of has purple on it, it's probably rescue grass, and you really need to make an application in the fall and not wait until the spring. Most of our data shows the spring applications are very poor.
So the key here, we're trying to gauge the timing. With
Yes.
all of the things you've just talked about,
Yes.
what's the best timing for these applications? Say you want to control bromes or other weeds that would come up.
Yeah, so if your target, if the weed has already come up, couple of things for a post-emergence herbicide. We want there to be a few leaves on our weeds. We need coverage for that herbicide to absorb. We want our wheat to probably have a few leaves on it. Take a look at your herbicide label. Most of them will require 2 to 3 leaves. And we also want active growth. So if you have plants that are just sitting and hanging out, maybe wait until you have some new leaves coming on before you apply that post-emergence herbicide.
County ag educators can really help sort through the issue and some of the solutions.
Absolutely. The educators are our link into getting into those fields, because I can't get to every field, and they have a great knowledge base for their counties that I don't have. So if we have plants, we're not sure what they are, let's start sending it through the email, text message chain, and find out what the best solution is for management.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Misha.
Thank you.
And for a link to your local county office, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
October always brings the wrap up of the summer crop season. And Josh, where are we with the summer crops this year?
Yeah, we're looking pretty good. We're kind of getting towards that back end. We're well out of corn for the most part. We've even heard a lot of folks back east have started to wrap up corn harvest. Yields are all over the board. There are some folks that are really happy with their corn, not as happy with their other crops. There are some folks that are really happy with their beans and milo and not so happy with their corn. So kind of based on when the rain hit is really going to be your telltale. When we had that good rain early, the corn looks better. Where we had a little bit better later rain, some of of our milo and our soybean look a little bit better. So I think it's good to just get things out of the field and get them in the bin. So that's a step in the right direction. The good thing is, from most folks that I've talked to, that's probably once again not going to be universal. Our double crop looks better than a lot of our main crops did because we just had those timely rainfalls. Now, we still got a lot of time on them, and some of them are quite a bit out, and these really hot conditions and how dry we've been in the last several weeks is probably going to start walking those backwards. So we need a rain to finish out those double crops. I know a lot of folks that are picking cotton and cutting those later beans probably don't want a rain. Our wheat guys and our double crop folks are really needing a rain right now, and that's kind of where we're sitting.
Talking about wheat, you're actually doing some studies out here about some of the cover crops.
Yeah, so we've been looking at cover crops for several years, and one of the almost tried and true benefits that we've seen year in and year out, we talk about cover crops a lot. Of some years it has a yield benefit, some years it doesn't, maybe what system you're in. The one thing we have seen is going a winter cover crop into our summer crops, we have seen a very consistent weed management benefit. Something that we've been able to kind of identify is some of our small grain and small grain mixes are really good at controlling weeds going into our summer crops, as well as in season in something like a soybean that has those very challenging weeds that we have to manage. Unfortunately, a lot of our recommendations right now for weed management are planting fairly high, high rate of seed. We're talking about the same as our wheat folks are planting at around 60 pounds, 70 pounds of material seed going out there. For a cover crop standpoint and solely getting to weed management, that's too high. Right. And so we're wanting to look at some of our reduced rates, and so right behind us we're looking at seeding rates of a wheat small grain mix only, wheat and canola where wheat is the dominant cover crop, and then a canola wheat where canola is the dominant, to kind of see where our weed management stands. And we're going from 5 pounds of canola and 60 pounds of wheat all the way down to 1 pound of canola, 20 pounds of wheat. So looking at seeing if we can drastically cut the seeding rate of those cover crops and still get that weed management benefit. I know we look out and we say it's kind of weedy. That's the point. Right. We want the stress to occur. That way, this is worst case scenario. No-till into some wheat stubble that has some grassy weeds, some summer weeds still hanging around. Now we pretty much are throwing those cover crops to the fire and say, what can you do? Show me what you can do on the back end, and that's what we're hoping to find here. And at least based on our previous data, it's gonna look good. How good those lower rates do is the real question we have at hand.
You talked about mixing canola and wheat in there. Why did you do that rather than just stay with one grass or a broadleaf?
Well, having the mixes is always good. For one, we never know which one's going to do better to provide us good cover, and cover is what we're predominantly looking for. The other thing is we already have a lot of data showing how beneficial canola as a crop can be. We're potentially getting the benefits of a canola crop into our system and not having actually canola or spending a ton of money on the canola crop. It's not saying canola is not a great crop, but this is maybe that one extra additional use we can use for that really good canola genetics we already have in the region to throw it into some of these cover crop mixes and be highly beneficial.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Josh Lofton, Crop and System Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Hello, Wes Lee here with your Mesonet weather report. When you average Oklahoma temperatures for 2020, they appear pretty ordinary. We have had 4 months with above normal temperature indicated by the red arrows and 5 months below normal shown by the blue arrows. September came in about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. October has mostly continued the cooler than normal trend. This graph shows September and October long-term average temperatures in the blue fill, while the dark line is what was observed through midweek. Average daily temperatures for the first week of October were all below normal before a short-term heat wave brought us above normal starting on Wednesday. You can see that the heat is expected to continue through the weekend, with temperatures expected to be in the 80s or low 90s on Saturday, while the average high would be about 75 degrees statewide. This warm trend may not continue for long, though. The National Weather Service forecast for next week has us expecting normal temperatures in the northwestern half of the state, indicated by the gray color, while the southeast may have chances of slightly above normal temperatures shown in tan. Further out in 2 weeks, the entire state is shown as back to normal or gray. While the expected La Nina heat has not yet been fully realized, unfortunately, the lack of rainfall has been true to form. Now here's Gary focusing on the moisture situation.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, I'm afraid the moisture situation's not looking good. If we go right to the new drought monitor map, we can see where those problem areas are really starting to crop up. Boy, there's a lot of color on this new drought monitor map. We have a large area of moderate drought now introduced into north central Oklahoma. It extends all the way down from the Kansas border into northern Logan and northern Kingfisher County. So another problem area that's been building, and we finally see that pop into moderate drought. And then we have a larger area of extreme to severe drought across the west central and southwestern portion of the state. That southwestern severe area has now been transformed into extreme drought as we go along the Texas-Oklahoma border up into Roger Mills County. This 60-day rainfall map from the Mesonet, we can see the areas that have gotten good rain, obviously the southeastern quarter of the state. Then you get up into those areas covered in the green, that's 1 to 2 inches of rainfall. Even a little bit of blue out in the panhandle, that's for less than an inch, so those areas show up quite nicely. We go right to the departure from normal rainfall map for the last 60 days. Then those deficits do start to show up from 2 to 3 inches across a large portion of western and northern Oklahoma, 3 to 4 to even 5 inches as we go in parts in west central, north central, and northeast Oklahoma. This is a map showing the probability of at least an inch of rainfall. There you see it in the white. Less than 10% of a chance of at least an inch of rainfall accumulating over that. The chances for rain are not looking good right now. So the problem areas showing up are far western Oklahoma, up across the northern half of the state. And really, if we don't see rainfall across those areas, we're just going to have to keep showing more and more color on that drought monitor map. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Well, the drier conditions are continuing in Oklahoma. So, Derrell, how are wheat pastures shaping up?
Well, you know, we got off to a pretty good start. We had moisture in August. There were some people got planted early, and the wheat came up well and is doing well. Some people planted after the moisture, and I think the wheat's coming up. The problem is we haven't had any moisture in about 2 or 3 weeks in most of western Oklahoma. So it's not going to stay this way if we continue on this path.
So is that going to be a threat to winter grazing at all?
Well, it could. We've got a good start, but it's going to require some follow-up moisture. If you look at the weather, we've got La Nina conditions pretty firmly entrenched right now, and we're kind of playing that out in a classic sense. So there's not much moisture in the forecast, and if we don't get some follow-up moisture in October, then I think this wheat will really begin to suffer and not produce enough pasture for us.
So, with all that in mind, how is this going to impact cattle feeder markets?
Well, we're at the time of the year when we should be close to our seasonal low for calves in Oklahoma, and we kind of count on that stocker cattle demand as we bring a lot of calves to town. Our biggest runs are still ahead of us in the next month or so, but normally, or at least if we have wheat pasture demand, that kind of offsets that and minimizes that seasonal pressure. And if the wheat pasture is struggling, then we could see some additional pressure, so we might push these prices a little bit lower over the next month or so.
So, talking about drought and how that's going to impact cattle, is there anything else that producers should consider in regards to cattle markets going forward into the new year?
Well, as we go through this fall, we kind of need to be aware of these drought conditions. That may force some people to kind of change their plans a little bit. Couple things. One is that this time of the year, it's very typical, and we're seeing it this year, where we see some differences in price changes according to the weight of cattle. So if you've got lightweight calves and you're looking at a potential to maybe put another 50 pounds on them, those pounds may not be worth a whole lot If they're bigger cattle, say over 600 pounds, those pounds can be worth a lot more. There's a sharp price break around 600 pounds for steers, 550 for heifers. The other thing that cow-calf producers probably ought to keep in mind is this cull cow market. We normally see seasonal lows in late October, early November. And so if you're in a situation where you're probably going to have to cull sooner rather than later, it may make sense to do it sooner rather than later and take advantage of the fact that these prices have not yet dropped as much as they probably will over the next month or 6 weeks.
All righty, Derrell. Dr. Derrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
October is a traditional time for spring calving operations when the cows are brought in, preg checked, and the calves are weaned. It's also a time, of course, when we make some decisions about which cows we're going to cull and which ones we're going to keep. If we market these cull cows at this time of the year, or even if we wait till after the first of the year, marketing cull cows to me means having a good understanding of what affects market price of these cull cows. If you look at the market news reports coming out of such things as Oklahoma City or whichever market that you choose to take your cows to, you'll probably see that the cows are priced into 4 different categories. The USDA grades cows as breakers, those very, very fleshy cows, boning utility or boner cows. Those are those that are just kind of moderately fleshed. And then the thinner cows fall into 2 categories, leans, and the very, very thin small cows being classified as lights. As you look at those market news reports, what you'll notice is that the breaker cows and the boning utility cows are often priced at about the same amount in price per hundredweight. And then there'll be a $3, $4, $5 drop off between those cows and the leans, and then the lights often are even substantially discounted from those. But I think it's even more important that we understand that within each one of those USDA grades, you'll see cows classified as either high dressing percent, average dressing percent, or low dressing percent cows. And within those differences in dressing percent, you see really larger differences in price. Let's define dressing percent. That is just the percentage of the live weight of the cow that actually ends up in the carcass being hung on the rail. And anything that will influence that percentage will affect whether she goes into that high, average, or low dressing percent category. For instance, such things as gut fill. That's the #1 factor affecting dressing percent. A cow that looks real full, she's got a lot of water, a lot of feed in her, that will probably be classified as one of the lower dressing percent cows. Also, a lot of excess mud and manure on the cow as she goes through the sale ring. That again is weight that's on the live weight, but is not on the carcass weight, and it generally then will depress dressing percent. Some other things, horns can be a factor, large udders, cows with a lot of leather. Some of those in the Bos Indicus breed types will have lower dressing percent. As you look at the market news reports, you'll find that cows that are listed as low dressing percent cows are often priced $10 to $12 per hundredweight less than cows in the same grade that are high dressing percent cows. That tells me that there's no real advantage in trying to really tank up or have cows extra full as you're taking them to the market. Marketing these cull cows and knowing what's going on in the market price can really be helpful to you. And we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
The price of wheat crept above $5, and Kim, that's kind of big news in this market.
Well, I think it should be big news. You can go back, 5 or 6 months, I know a farmer called me and says, Kim, are we going to have $4.50 wheat? And I said, oh, we probably got a 50-50 chance of get. He said, what about $5? And I said, well, maybe 10%. I think $5 is a big deal.
What's causing that shakeup?
Well, actually, we're at $5.25. There's a lot going on in the market right now. I think the biggest thing is the importers, Egypt, Algeria, Syria, these importing countries are buying massive amounts of wheat. They're, like Egypt normally has a 3 to 4 month storage, they're shooting for a 6 month. So there's real strong export demand, and that export demand is for bread, flour, wheat. You get looking at production, I think the market's already looking out to next year. You look at hard red winter wheat ending stocks, under 400 million bushels, somewhere down around 370, 380. The average ending stocks is about 530 million bushels. So wheat stocks are, especially hard red winter wheat, are relatively tight in the United States. Russia, you know, they keep raising Russian wheat production. They've got it over 3 billion bushels now. However, they're talking about export quotas starting in January. It's dry in Russia, it's dry in the hard red winter wheat area.
With all of that news, it's kind of that October surprise that they always talk about. In this case, you have the higher wheat prices, but you know, drills are rolling across the state. Will this rally in the price influence more planted acres across Oklahoma, you think?
Well, I called some seed dealers and talked to some seed dealers, and they say over the last couple of weeks, the demand for the seed has picked up. I talked to one dealer, and he said that he's had the best year that he's had in the last 3 or 4 years. So it looks like wheat sales are going relatively good. They probably picked up a little bit. If it didn't rain, it would really, if we could get some rain on this ground, I think the acreage would increase for sure. The way it is, we'll probably have slightly higher acreage.
That's great news for wheat. Where are we with corn and bean prices?
Well, you've had corn and bean prices increasing too. You look at soybeans. I mean, you go back a couple months, where's it, $8.70 on the futures contract? It's now at $10.50. That's a $1.80 increase. You look at corn price, we've had 65 to 70 cent price increase from $3.20 to $3.90 on the board.
So with all of that optimism you said, do you think that we'll continue to see that price rise, or is this kind of a cautious optimism?
I think it's a cautious optimism. You've got the importing countries buying in advance. We get out there, the COVID kind of goes away, you know, we get a vaccine for that. The economic situation stabilizes around the world. They're going to have more wheat in storage than they normally do, and they'll back off on exports, and we'll see these prices fall possibly even faster than they went up. How long will they stay? Who knows? The question is, you can forward contract wheat for $5.25 to $5.50 for the 21 harvest. Do you want to do it?
Do we want to do it?
I think it depends on the producer. I might just take a little bit of it. I don't believe I'd go after it whole hog because it's dry. I don't know how much I'm going to produce, and if it stays dry here and in Russia and we have a short crop, we could have $6, $7 wheat if it stays dry and production's low.
You've always said, and correct me on this, prices come and go, but weather makes, I forget your quote, say it.
Policy comes and policy goes, but weather determines price.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Finally today, SUNUP's Curtis Hare takes us to Garfield County to see how a dedicated community is sprucing up their senior center.
The hard part is almost done. A few more outlines and a couple of strips of tape, then all that's left is to flesh out the canvas. For the past 3 weeks, the ladies at the Covington Senior Center in Garfield County have been meticulously crafting barn quilts, and they're down to their last one.
A barn quilt is a painted picture of a quilt block. And we made ours to represent this area.
Zoe Bowles is a board member for the Senior Center. After some repairs to the old building a few years ago, she says an opportunity arose.
And then last year we had this wall painted. And it looked so plain and bare to us. We decided that We would like to get on the quilt trail, the barn quilt trail, with others in the area.
The Oklahoma Barn Quilt Trail is an agritourism attraction that ranges across the state. Once that bare wall is covered with these beautiful images, the building, which also serves as the historical center, will be registered on the trail.
And we've had lots of fun with it too. And maybe it might bring some tourists to our historical town.
I've been working with the seniors here and their group to do barn quilts, and they chose to do different things that talk about the history of the town, because this is also the museum.
With a rich history in oil and a long tradition in cattle and wheat production, the designs were chosen to represent that. While bringing in visitors to the center is a goal, the main purpose is to show pride in the history of Covington.
To beautify and also to share the history with passerbys.
Show pride in our community, and we just think it'll draw some interest, spruce up Main Street. We'd like to do that.
Zoe hopes other buildings on Main Street follow their lead and start their own barn quilt projects. But until then, the Senior Center will be the best looking old building on the block. In Garfield County, I'm Curtis Hare.
Thanks so much for joining us for SUNUP this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm LYNDALL STOUT. Have a great week, everyone. And remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.